Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the Right to Believe speaker series. I am your host, Howard Self. I have the honor to serve as president of Right to Believe. Right to Believe is a not-for-profit organization based in the United States. Our mission is to uphold the fundamental rights of religious freedom for all. We represent tens of thousands of individuals and organizations which are fighting to protect the right to believe in one's religion without undue governmental interference. Religious freedom is a fundamental human right, a critical keystone for any prosperous society. The theme for our series is, quote, "We are all God's children. Together, we will protect our right to believe," unquote. Our speaker series features spiritual leaders, educators, civil activists, and government officials from around the world, speaking on various topics related to religious freedom. Today, I am joined with my good friends, Bishop Paul Murray and Imam Talib Shareef. I can't think of two more qualified people to be speaking on our topics today. First, let me introduce Dr. Murray. Bishop Dr. Paul Murray has been in Christian leadership for more than 25 years and is the senior pastor of the Lighthouse Church in Millersville, Maryland. Dr. Murray serves on the executive board of One Way Churches International. He also serves as an executive board member of the First Amendment Voice Alliance. He is co-chair of the Capital Area Coalition for Religious Freedom and also is a member of the National Committee on Religious Liberty. Internationally, Dr. Murray is a member of the steering committee for the International Religious Freedom Roundtable, chaired by U.S. Ambassador Sam Brownback, and serves on the board of directors of the International Religious Freedom Secretariat. Now for our friend Imam. Imam Talib Shareef is president and imam of the historic Nations Mosque, Masjid Muhammad, a prominent mosque in Washington, D.C. He is the vice chair and national chaplain of the Muslim Veterans Association after having served in the United States Air Force for an incredible 30 plus years. He is chair of the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan, Washington, and was the first imam with military service to offer a prayer at an opening session of the US Congress. Under the high patronage of His Majesty Mohammed VI, the King of Morocco, Imam Shareef received the kingdom's highest royal medal and honor for his outstanding interfaith leadership. Just amazing qualifications of these two gentlemen with us today. I want to personally thank both of you for supporting our campaign and for being with us today.
Thank you.
I'd like to begin, Imam, with you. Imam Shareef, could you share a little bit about your faith, about your work related to interfaith and religious freedom as you're working there in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere?
Oh, thank you. I certainly appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to be here with you. And I'm certainly honored to be with my dear friend, Dr. Murray, as well. Always an honor to be with him. As you mentioned, I've served with the Interfaith Conference. In fact, that's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, interfaith organization in America that brings Muslims, Christians, and Jews together. In fact, it's 41st year now. And that organization deals with, yes, getting to know each other, but we made them work together as well. We do a unity walk that brings the faith community together, putting a lot of emphasis on faith, the expressions of the various faith. In fact, the Interfaith Conference has 11 permanent religious groups, although there are many different faiths that are part of it. We do a unity day. We do Bridge Builders Awards, those who are bridging building bridges with interfaith communities. We recognize them on an annual basis. We also do an interfaith concert we get a chance to experience the beauty of the different cultural expressions from a
that's
different,
wonderful.
again, highlighting the faith communities. Dr. Martin Luther King, we do a big event every year on Dr. King. We used to do that event in January. We pushed that now to April. And of course, we know that he really connected with our founding principles in the struggle to see humanity free and the civil rights movement. And we focus on youth leadership as well, interfaith youth leadership. And in addition to those things, we have an international interfaith religious freedom office out of our Mosque. I traveled around the world. State Department, they send me around to speak on religious freedom, human rights, Islam in America, and extremism, those things. So we've gone to several countries just to speak on those particular things as well. I'm involved in a lot of the lobbying on Capitol Hill about religious freedom. In fact, we just spoke on Capitol Hill recently about the Uyghurs in China in terms of what they're suffering right now. The oppression they're suffering, religious oppression that they're suffering. We're involved in that. I'm also involved in the Mayor's Interfaith Council. But it's not where the mayor dictates. Obviously, we have freedom to participate, and we advise her on various things. The council consists probably of about all the major faith in the city of DC. And of course, we've been in DC more than 80 years, which is a long time for Islam being established, even in America. So our voice, we have a very strong voice there as well. So there's just some brief things I wanted to share.
Well, thank you so much. It's quite amazing the breadth of work that you're doing. As you probably know by now from Dr. Murray, we held a couple of rallies there in Washington, D.C., objecting to the court's interference in religion. We were able to do those prior to the pandemic, and we were so grateful, even from that time, to get the support of the Capital Region Coalition for Religious Freedom, which I know you're a part of.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for being with us today. Dr. Murray, could you share a bit about the work of the coalition and how it started, and a little bit also of your background?
Sure. Thank you, Howard, and let me just extend my gracious welcome to my dear friend Imam Talib Shareef. We have traveled around the world together, involved in religious freedom issues. When it comes to addressing religious freedoms and protections of religious freedom, when one religion is attacked, all religions are in that capacity be attacked also. So therefore, although we may come from two different faith communities, we're united together in the protection of our faiths and the protection of individuals. So that's one of the things that I think is paramount to what we're doing here. And my work, as you shared, and thank you for the introduction, my work both domestically and internationally is all around religious liberty issues and our religious freedom, addressing persecution, traveling around the world, addressing these kinds of issues. And so the Imam and I have been able to share the panel together in many different countries discussing these issues. But one of the things that we found that in the United States, as we look internationally, it's very easy for us to go out and start pointing at different countries and the issues that are impacting there that are really atrocious in some places, when we have folks that are being beheaded in Nigeria because of their faith, when we have in China, Muslim communities that are being thrown into concentration camps, or they call re-education camps. We see all of these kinds of things, but even in the United States, we have a constitutional guarantee of religious freedom that at times, which we're seeing right now, is being pushed, challenged, and even stepped on in many different ways. And when we were looking at some of the issues impacting the Washington, D.C. area and the faith communities, there have been several issues that have come up that we've had discussions with that made us say, we've got to do something and start bringing some faith leaders together to bring voice to our concerns, to bring awareness, education, and even advocacy around the protections of our religious freedoms in the District of Columbia and the surrounding area. So we formulated this coalition, this capillary coalition for religious freedom, to specifically come together for individuals, communities that want to, that have an issue that they say, look, we need to address this. And then they know that they have a team that is coming together as one united voice. And I think that's the most critical point, is that we as a community of believers, regardless of our faith systems, understand that we must protect one another's guarantees that are protected by the Constitution. But we see within our court systems, and we even see with some legislation, that it's trying to erode and step into or overreach into those areas. So that was the purpose of the forming of the coalition, which is brand new, and we're happy to say that, you know, that we have active members like Imam Talib. We have other minority religious communities that are part of this, like the Church of Scientology. We have the Baptist church community. So we're making sure that we're reaching every different faith community that resides in the capital region, so that we can address these issues.
It certainly sounds like your coalition is a who's who in the realm of faith in Washington, D.C. That's even creating, that's quite an accomplishment. My hat's off to you. I wanted to take the liberty, Dr. Murray, to quote you from, I mentioned we had a couple of rallies for religious freedom there, and you were our best speaker, I have to say it. And I want to quote you from one statement you made there at the rally. This is Dr. Paul Murray, quote, "We call upon all who understand the central importance of religious liberty as our first freedom to join in common cause to halt the serious erosion of religious freedom as evidenced in this case and many others," unquote. I thought that was a beautiful statement that kind of encapsulated what we're about in the Right to Believe, our Right to Believe organization as well. Just would you like to say any more to that quote?
Well,
There's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, but I think it really draws an importance that that religious liberty is our first freedom, and that we all must understand, whether you are part of a faith community or not, the Constitution has certain guarantees. And those that may not even be a part of a faith community must understand that if we step on one constitutional right, then it opens the door for other constitutional rights to be stepped on too. So therefore, we should always uphold. We may not agree theologically, but we must uphold the guarantees of our Constitution. And unfortunately, we are seeing a serious erosion across our nation, whether it's in the local courts, the state courts, whether it is with legislation that is taking place through town halls and counties that are legislating and putting things out there that really violate our religious freedoms.
Are there a couple of examples that come to mind? As you know, our audience is international now. We have people literally from around the world with us this morning. And we found in our series up till now, the situation in the different countries of people who've spoken on are quite different. And sometimes we would tell a little bit about the state of things here in America, and it was very big news to many of them, because they know about the First Amendment. They know that religious freedom is protected. So a little hard to understand how religious freedom can be encroached upon with such a strong foundation in our country. So we found some examples helps them to understand.
Sure.
You would mention one or
right. And happy to share that. And I'm pretty sure Imam Talib can share some also.
Yeah.
From a national perspective, when we look at religious freedom protections, our society in America is very unique, which is powerful, because in many different countries or in other countries, when you hold a place within your faith community, it's often segregated, that you go to church, you go to the mosque, you go to the synagogue, and you perform your faith acts there, and then that's it. in America, we have what we call separation of church and state, but that does not mean you lose your identity as a person of faith. And there are individuals that may not hold the title of reverend, imam, or rabbi, or another, title that would be used in the faith community, but they serve within their local faith communities. For example, in Atlanta, Georgia, we had the chief of the fire department who several years ago was a member of a Christian church, and he would teach Sunday school. And in the process of teaching Sunday school, he wrote a little Bible study booklet that he would use at facilitating his classes on Sunday mornings. In that teaching, he takes directly from the scriptures. In one particular issue, he brought up about homosexuality and what the Bible says about that. When that was in that book that he published, there was a group, because he was fire chief, that went to the mayor of Atlanta and said, we are concerned that the fire chief is going to be prejudiced against us from the LGBT community. And the mayor called the fire chief in, and the fire chief said, hey, look, when I'm out there putting out a fire, I don't ask if somebody's black, white, what faith they hold to, or whether or not they hold to a faith. I don't ask if they're gay, straight. He said, we're there to put out a fire. What I do in my church is what I do, and this is how I stand, and this is what I believe, and this is where I'm going to stand. Well, the mayor, in response, required him to go into sensitivity training, which he said, I don't need to go into sensitivity training because this is who I am and this is what I represent. I'm not going to compromise my moral values, my biblical understanding of scripture to be able to continue to do the work I'm here. It does not negate my work. Well, the mayor ended up firing the chief.
Because of his faith. Basically.
Yeah, because of his faith. And that's one example. Fortunately, he brought it to court, and recently he won the case. We have the cake baker situation. There are many different situations. We had in Houston, Texas, where the mayor there wanted to limit what could be said behind the pulpit. And that was brought up a lot of controversy. So we see those kinds of issues. This particular case that I'm very familiar with in DC regarding the Unification Church is another case where we see where the government is not only meddling, but dictating what not only the theocracy, but the leadership structure, which no government or court has a right to do. They can't step into our houses of faith and tell us who is in leadership, or to even define what we state is our part of our theology. And so these are just a couple of examples, and I'd love to, turn it back to you so you can turn it over to Imam and let him share.
Thank you very much for that. Imam, I'd really love to hear your thoughts about this growing problem as we see of the threat to religious freedom, and also some of your experience in the different areas you're working in with this kind of threat coming from different areas, some from executive directives, some coming from judicial, some coming from legislation, even as Dr. Murray mentioned. But would you share with us a little bit of your experience and thoughts on this area?
Yeah, there are various things that go through our mind, but I want to say that anytime we begin to see a government that starts the way ours started out, the founding, the forming, at its beginning, and we begin to see God being taken out of the school, for instance.
Yes.
We begin to see, I was in the military for 30 years, and when I took my oath, I said, so help me God.
Imam, you must have joined the military when you were like 8 years old or something. Amazing.
Yeah, that's just that spirit. Thank you. And but we also had at one point required of our presidents to invoke God. So and of course we have attacks on that now. Anytime we have attacks on those kind of things that are very fundamental, because when we look at how our society started, our founders, they certainly had to have had strong faith and allegiance to God, to put those words, that language, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all are created equal, created, not accidents. Nobody's an accident, created equal and endowed by their creator. So it's twice. And I want to just also say for Muslims, that's just hearing that twice really makes Muslims very comfortable. And because when Islam was revealed to our prophet in history, it was also the word, the name that we use commonly, Allah, was not how God revealed himself to Muhammad. It was creator. And he mentioned created. And so we find something similar in our precious documents. And so that language really, it shows that is a natural aspiration of every human soul. And I want to just get this piece of history right now to show how we've gotten away from something that was upon that was rooted in history. There's a book out by Rose Wilder Lane about man's struggle to establish democracies and something to that effect. But she says there were only 3 attempts in human history to establish societies under God. And so she mentions this is a scholar, and so she studies. She's not a Muslim, but this is her scholarly work. And she says that the first attempt in human history was with Abraham, peace be upon him. And because we're familiar with Abraham, he's one that ties religions together.
That's right.
He's called founder.
Yeah.
Now she also says since Abraham, as she studies the history, she saw another attempt in Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him as well. And of course, as part of our religious freedoms, we had to remind Muslim countries about the society that Prophet Muhammad established, where everyone had equal rights. And we know that some religions that are not Muslims in certain Muslim countries have been oppressed. So we had to remind them about that society that he established, where Christians, Jews, everyone were free to worship as they pleased to worship. And then as she looked at history, she said there was not another attempt until American
Revolution.
And she said that even in America, her study shows that America, in establishing its society, it drew from the first 2. So look here now. This is why this is so important to us, because now we have a society that's building an ideal that would tie man, every single human being, to Almighty God. And it would insist that government recognize that tie. Now, this is what we're talking about now, but this is the foundation of what we'll find. It was to insist that government recognize that tie between man and God. A tie that government didn't make. Government didn't make it. So that's tie that government can't break. It's not supposed to interfere about. Government has to recognize that tie and treat all citizens as the creation of God. We didn't create ourselves. There's creation and there's creator. And God gave them, each individual that he created, certain rights.
That's right.
And man, the world, or the government cannot take away from them.
Amen.
And this is what we're here to speak about. And this is precious, very, very precious. This idea that we will stop. This is what makes for a true democracy. A true democracy, it must recognize that there is an authority higher than man, and people are accountable to their creator, the one that designed and gave them their life. And he also put he puts high value on life. Every person is, in the Quran says that the value of a human life is as the value of all of humanity. But certainly as a Muslim, we've had those attempts with our religious expression. People saying we can't, the term uses Sharia, which brings walls up. They say we don't want Sharia in America. But that's our religious practice. And really, Sharia is really not to be confined to, it's just an Arabic term. It just means that every religion has their practices. Christians have theirs. They have, if we use the term Sharia, there are Christian Sharia. There's Jewish Sharia. And no one is to be denied their way of their approach to their creator. But we are seeing those things. We're seeing those things also in other areas in terms of lifestyles. So much we saw where there were attempts to force religious institutions to accept lifestyles, to bring people together upon lifestyles that their faith has condemned. That's not acceptable in their faith. You can't enforce those things. So these are some of the things we're saying. That's why we have to be very cautious about when we see this happening, because it's fragile now. Particularly with those that we have now. Even our religion was, Dr. Murray mentioned the separation of church and state. And that was going both ways to make sure that no religion would subjugate to another. And there will not be religious preference. The Constitution says it. You can't give a preference. And we see some of that happening now as well. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for that historical the references there. It's very revealing that these first attempts, in effect, led up to the American Revolution and experiment, as it has been called. And we know we have to be vigilant to protect our system of government, our way of life, and especially our freedoms, and the freedom of religion being the first one. I noticed from a study from the Pew Research Center about religious restrictions around the world. They appear to be on the rise, according to this study. President Trump seems to be a strong proponent for religious freedom globally, according to his remarks last year at the United Nations General Assembly, and now his focus on foreign policy to protect religious freedom abroad. It seems like both of you have a global footprint. You're both international players. You're both involved in America and also beyond. And in working to promote religious freedom around the world, Imam Shareef, can you share your thoughts on why the United States sees religious freedom as a foreign policy priority? Why would that be a foreign policy priority for our country, from your viewpoint?
Yeah, certainly, as I mentioned earlier, about our democracy. And of course, that's one of our objectives, our strategic objectives also, to promote democracy, this type of democracy that we have, where that freedom, that first freedom that we have is practiced and protected globally. That's one of the reasons why the president, because he's upon our strategic documents, he's supposed to establish that. Now, again, as being the country that we are, being one of the youngest countries in human history, this new human society established upon that. This is one of the reasons why all the other countries look at us, because we do have people from there. We are a nation of nations. People from everywhere is here. They're here in America. Upon that, we have 40 nationalities represented in our mosque here in Washington D.C. One of them said before coming to America that they studied 18 different constitutions.
Wow!
And there was not one that could touch that came close to the one here in America. And this is one of the reasons why they look to America. You know, we're defenders of that. We're supposed to be defenders of that. And I would just, again, I say just a couple of days ago, I'm on Capitol Hill again, requesting of the president. Congress just passed to condemn what's happening in China with the Muslims there.
Yes.
And the president, he agreed with Congress, and he has some responsibility now to condemn them. And he hasn't done that yet.
I see.
And of course, members from that society in China, they're here and they petition our government, and it had worked. They looked at us, and it had worked, but now they're asking us to act on what now has been passed.
Yes.
You see, that's a strength that we have. And again, because it's an aspiration of every human soul. Every human soul can connect with that. And they see that better expressed in no other society than from America, despite the challenges that we're seeing right now because of our core and because of our foundation.
Yes, there's no doubt about that. America provides hope for people. And I'm glad that your work includes putting the president's feet to the fire in a way to follow through on our ideals and support those who are oppressed like that. It's part of the fabric of our country and of ourselves, we feel. Thank you very much, Imam.
Yeah, you know what they say, Howard, you know what it is? They say that politicians don't see the light until they feel the heat.
That's right. I've heard that often.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Murray, would you like to add any points from your experience internationally as well on this aspect of religious freedom being a global factor?
When we look at from the USA standpoint, I know, as Imam has brought up, there are certain things that this administration is doing. One of them that this administration has really been capitalizing on is the International Religious Freedom Roundtable.
Mm-hmm.
And what this is a group that convenes it's a private sector that comes together to address religious freedoms around the world. And then we reach out to the State Department. And what's unique is that the ambassador for international religious freedom is Ambassador Sam Brownback, who helps co-chair this particular roundtable that we convene almost on a weekly basis. It's almost every Tuesday we are meeting, and we bring up these kinds of issues like China with Uruguay's, and we look at North Korea, and we look at just every country, Nigeria especially right now, what is taking place in Nigeria. And what this roundtable does is, one is that a lot of the people that are made up from the roundtable have organizations, or they are connected with in-country staff or citizens. So we've even had defectors come and speak before Congress. We've had individuals come share pictures and stories about what's happened to family members because of the persecution in the countries that they reside in. And so what we do is we take an advocacy standpoint where we will draft letters to the State Department, to our president, that is then signed on by all of those that wish to from the roundtable. And then what we are doing is we are creating roundtables globally. So for example, we established one in South Korea, addressing North Korea issues. We have a roundtable in Nigeria. We have a roundtable. We've got right now 25 roundtables established with a goal of having 100 roundtables.
Whoa.
At the same time, parallel to that is the State Department is creating a international religious alliance. So they are looking for counterparts like Ambassador Brownback to come in and serve in that capacity to bring value, weight, and credibility to religious freedoms in those countries. Wow. And so this particular criteria that is set there. So there are a lot of things that are being done in multiple levels that would have that really have a lot of weight in addressing these issues, because really, if anybody would pick up an international paper, or if you would just Google religious persecution globally, you would be astonished at how many people are dying every day because of their faith. You would be astonished at how many people are being imprisoned, being tortured, how we have people in India and in China and other places that are really feeling the pressures of their government because of their faith. There are even people where they are being arrested and then their organs are taken out and their organs are sold internationally. And these are folks that are imprisoned and put into re-education camps. Instead of calling them prisons, they call them re-education camps.
Yes, sounds nice.
Yeah, see it in North Korea too. So internationally, America is looking at it and saying, look, we have to say enough is enough. And when it comes to humanity, and although we have our issues domestically and we need to safeguard those, but we also understand that when we look out around the world and see what's happening, we don't want the USA to ever become like that. So therefore, it's very important that when we see any kind of encroachment domestically, we need to give a very loud voice to it and demand immediate stop of any kind of actions by government in any way that encroaches upon religious freedom.
Amen. As as I mentioned at the beginning, the title of our series includes "We Are All Children of God."
Yeah.
So it's natural for us to see the people who are being oppressed around the world as our brothers and sisters, and we should help them in any way we can. And I'm so grateful, Dr. Murray, for you and the Imam, the incredible work you're doing in exactly that. And we can see how important it is also to protect this First Amendment of ours that was given by the wisdom of the founding fathers. They somehow knew the most important right is the religious freedom right, and everything else kind of springs from that. If you don't have the right to worship, the right to follow your conscience, then everything else is definitely secondary to that right. So we can see why it's so important to support. And here in America, as we've hinted at a couple of times, there's a court case that we're very concerned with in Right to Believe, and that is a court case in Washington, D.C., in the Superior Court that's gone on for 9 years. And it's a dispute. There was a schism within the Unification Church movement. Since that schism began, the founder, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, has passed away. But the court case continues for 9 years now. And in that court case, the faith of a minority, which is the believers under Dr. Yunjin Preston Moon, are being positioned as somehow not true to their faith. The judges are trying to say there what their faith is and whether or not they're practicing it, and on like that. It's very, very disturbing, knowing the First Amendment clearly states that no court should become involved in a religious question, a religious dispute. And this schism is clearly that, and yet we're fighting now to win the victory in that court case. And we're very concerned because we feel that's a precedent-setting case. Dr. Murray, first with you, and then to the Imam. Could you explain why you decided personally to support the Right to Believe in this campaign, to have the UCI court case dropped because it is a question of faith, and why you see it as a religious question in its nature? We're on mute right now.
Sorry, anyone that follows the case is following the case would see the evidentiary record that is brought forth, and in it articulates some very critical pieces that speak to the principles and the theocracy within the Unification Church. And what the court is doing in this particular case is stepping in and defining or redefining the basic standard that is being promoted as the mission of that particular church. So although I'm not a member of that faith community, I look at my Christian faith community and it throws my hands up an alarm, because if they can step into your church community and do that, then that opens the door for them to step over into our church community, our faith community, and do the same thing. So when you look at the changes in the way that the judge is pointing to particular components of the question, the schism that's going on, and deciding herself how it's going to turn out, when really in a theocracy, it's defined within that community, and the Constitution states clearly that any kind of religious dispute must be handled within that religious entity. No court can intervene on that behalf, because that court cannot define, redefine, or even assess the meaning. And that's exactly what the court in DC is doing. It is saying your mission is this, the way you're structuring things needs to be this way. And when you're saying, no, that's not what we said, this is what's written here, and they're saying, well, this is how we're going to define it for you. No court has the right to do that. And so therefore, I've said, this is ridiculous. They can't do that. And we've got to give voice to this and say, stop. because what you're doing is violating a religious freedom. You're violating our First Amendment right for every member of the Unification Church that has agreed with the changes. No court can come in and say, you can make, we have a right to step into that. No, not at all. It must be settled within that church structure.
Thank you very much. I think you've hit right at the heart of the matter. And Imam, this case is drawing a great deal of attention internationally. When the Judge Cordero, came up for reappointment, the judge who made a summary judgment unfairly and unjustly, and I have to say unconstitutionally in this case, she came up for reappointment. From around the world, over 5,000 emails came into that commission to tell them she has made very egregious mistake legally and otherwise in this case, and please do not reappoint her. This concern is growing because we know the judiciary system works so much on precedent, on what's established, and then that's used to refer back to in many, many cases. So in effect, as Dr. Murray was implicating, once the door is opened by a judgment in this way, then what's to stop the court from stepping into any religious question, whether that's a church or whether that's a mosque or whether that is even a religiously oriented nonprofit, for example, which is what this is in the case, is a nonprofit. That's a wide variety of people who are now under threat from the court. Imam, I'd like to hear your thoughts about this, and especially about the danger of setting a precedent like this, endangering religious freedom.
Yeah, what I've heard this case, and what immediately came to my mind, I don't know if people are aware, in the history of America, there was an attempt to do this similar type of thing. This was my frame of reference. I thought about Muhammad Ali. And because Muhammad Ali, of course, he did not want to go, because of his faith, to join the military.
Yes.
And then of course, the course they initiated, we know he had to go all the way up to the Supreme Court, because the lower courts have basically determined that he was just trying to evade that the Nation of Islam, which that wasn't really a religion. You know what I mean? They were trying to interpret for him.
That's right. In effect, judge his faith or judge his religion.
Yeah. So they denied it, and they had to go to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court, in going back to those founding documents, those principles, freedom of religion, expression, and freedom of conscience. I mean, how can a person come into their created purpose and potential if they can't follow their own conscience? And of course, conscience subjective is something that's legal and acceptable, which eventually we know that they came to a unanimous vote that he was following, that was his faith. They couldn't interpret it, they couldn't change it for him. He was following that, he was following that's what he really believed.
Yes. And
they overruled the lower courts and set him free to do what he needed to do. So I thought about that, his life and his case, when I heard about this case. And of course, if that had been, if the Supreme Court had not overruled the lower courts, then of course, like you're saying, the precedence was very dangerous.
That's right.
When we come to the tide that our founders said that the government didn't make and should not break. That tie between man and how they see that. You can't interfere with that.
Yes.
And that's what those are my thoughts on basically what I see in this.
Well, thank you very much for that crystal clear example in American history, where the courts were overruled by the Supreme Court, going to our founding documents and saying, no, you cannot say this man is not following his own conscience. He's saying he's following his conscience, and you cannot say he's not, because this is, in essence, a religious question, which you have nothing to do with.
Yes.
And that was an important case for many of us, and we feel the same thing for this case. And that's why we're fighting hard about it, because we know the nature of the court system, and we can see around the country, as already both of you have referenced, there are a lot of different cases where people's right to believe is being threatened by courts, and they're being forced to do, in some cases, forced to do things they don't want to do, or they're being punished for continuing to do what their conscience and their religious faith is guiding them to do. And this, we know, is unconstitutional. So I wanted to check, Dr. Murray, in our discussion a little bit before we went on the air, as it is, for want of a better term, onto the internet. You mentioned that you had seen some references in another case already about this particular UCI court case, even before it's really finalized. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think this is really important, because folks have to understand really how the court system works. And when a ruling or judgment is made, that sets a precedent. And then every other case afterwards will refer to that case either to help support or defend whatever they're bringing up. And because this particular case has been in the courts for so long, and because certain rulings have been made, it has already set precedent where now it's being referenced in other cases to help others be able to go after a religious institution and allow government to step in. So they're saying, look, the government was able to step in, the court was able to step in here and do this. So therefore, the court can step in over here and do the same thing. So that's the reason why it's so important to understand that once something is done, it becomes a precedent, and other cases are now built on and they reflect back on that decision that's made by another court. And that's why it's so dangerous. And, you know, the president has an opportunity, may have an opportunity coming up in the appellate level to appoint 2 new judges. If that door opens up and the president is able to do that, the president needs to make sure that he is looking at judges who have not only a sensitivity, but a constitutional understanding of religious freedom. Mm-hmm. Because Judge Cordero does not. She has stepped in both feet. She has gone overboard in where she's at, and definitely violated the constitutional rights of every member of the unification movement, and therefore now puts every other religion in jeopardy. We are all in jeopardy now because of the decisions that she is making. And I think it's very important for us to understand that any judge that is appointed and reappointed must meet that bar of not only understanding and sensitivity, but also unbiased. You know, that judge needs to make sure that there's no bias in their reflection, and that they do not have, you know, they're not God. They are not the creator, Imam. And I think sometimes our judges think they are the creator, that they can decide, you know, well, this is how we're going to handle it. No, they have to go back to the Constitution and follow what the Constitution says. And this judge has not done that. And therefore it's setting precedents that's going to really hurt us around the country in all different faith communities.
Thank you so much, Dr. Murray. You know, what makes it even more egregious, I mentioned this case has been going on for 9 years, and progressively there's been, I don't know, 4 or 5 judges at least involved, because it's been spread out so long. But the very first judge dismissed this case and said clearly, this is a case of religious dispute between 2, you know, it's a schism within a church, within a religious movement. And it's clearly a religious dispute. The first judge dismissed it. And then the opposing party, or the complaining party, went to appellate court, and the appellate court sent it back and said, no, you must reopen it and everything. And now it's been 8 years later, and we're still, it's so egregious. And then decisions like Judge Cordero made were just so egregiously one-sided, and obviously showing that bias that you mentioned against Dr. Moon's faithful group. And now there's a new judge, Judge Anderson, who has to decide again, is this case thrown out because it is a religious dispute, or do I punish one side capriciously as has been directed by the judges before her? So it's a very delicate moment, important moment in history for this case and for all the implications and so on that will follow. Imam, would you share with us your view on this precedent-setting aspect as well?
Well, I like what you just said, it baffles me now if the first judge threw it out on the grounds supported and rooted in our fundamental law, the Constitution. That's the fundamental law, and then because we have the amendments that support that are upon that, and to again that underscores what we are speaking about now, the threats.
Yes.
For those that will come in and begin to interpret something that they really have no right to interfere in. And of course, we've established that. And if we do that, then of course, yes, we lower ourselves as a democracy to being those ones that we look at and say that they need to uphold those rights of religious expression. And we see it all the time where I was in the military, and we had individuals who were Muslims, and because I was not a chaplain, but I helped get the Muslim chaplaincy established. I'm one of the pioneers to get that established in the military.
Wonderful.
And I always work with all the chaplains. But you will have Muslims they would maybe have different understandings of the faith.
Yes.
And they will come to me. And some, for instance, you may just some small things,
disagreements.
They some in their respect, it's mandatory to have a beard. It's mandatory to wear a covering over the head for the males, and those kind of things. But they're not universal. But that's his understanding based on what he's following, and they have to accept that if that's what he now believes based on his understanding. And the military now, because they're to protect the Constitution. That's part of what the chaplain is to do in the military. They had to accept that. Even though you have one that may not wear it, and you have another will wear it. But because they are obeying their conscience, and they have that right. And that's why it's important to have as much pushback as we can to fight, to encourage our leaders, those in government who are entrusted to uphold the laws of the government, that they have to understand the serious sacred regard for human life, their tie to the Creator, and the sacred regard of the intent of the sacred documents upon which this country was founded. We have to continue to push that.
Amen. I have to say, after a while, it begins to feel like some type of inquisition is going on against this minority faith, because the first judge ruled that clearly this is a religious issue, and the following judges have ignored that. And all you have to do is look at the Constitution and then look at the facts of the case, as Dr. Murray mentioned, to see that that is the case. I'm so grateful to both of you as members of the coalition there in DC for supporting the right to believe and our campaign in this court case. And unfortunately, as it seems like our time just flies by in our series here, we're approaching the end of our time for our program. But I'd like to turn to each of you and let you have a final few words in general, whatever you'd like to say about this issue, particularly if you have anything to say about the court case, how you see your coalition there supporting the case, and so on. Anything you would like to say. Imam, would you like to?
Yes, I want to emphasize the idea that we've established as a nation. That idea that ties the individual to their creator. That is the strongest glue or adhesive that holds together the idea that we call a Western democracy. And that's the envy of every other society when they look at us. And we say this is the American experiment, but we must make sure we continue to forward to prove, so it proves itself to be sound and continue to excel in excellence towards a more perfect union, exemplified in that which ensures domestic tranquility, provides for security, and promotes the general welfare of all of its citizens, and make sure there's never a breach between the citizen and their creator and their created purpose and their understanding of how to serve their creator. That logic is clear. And we have to have the courage in all of our coalitions to push and promote that they follow the logic to its logical conclusion and set individuals free to serve their creator. We just had Independence Day. Yes. The real independence is the independence to live the life that the creator has ordained for you based on how you see it. That's the real independence. I close with that.
Well, thank you so much for that brilliant analysis that you've given us today. And I'm so grateful to you personally. I had heard about you from Dr. Murray before, but for me, today's a red letter day. I could actually meet you through the internet. And icing on the cake to know that we're both from North Carolina.
Yes, that's how it's mutual.
Thank you, Imam.
Indeed, you're welcome.
Dr. Murray, it looks in our discussion today, you'll have the final word. Anything you'd like to mention? I'd just like to point out, someone observing our work in this area pointed out that there's a great call for reform going on, as we know, not only in the nation's capital, but throughout the country, a reform of the police, and et cetera. And actually, we're calling for a reform too. We're calling for a reform of the judiciary, that they should not continue to really break the First Amendment in so many cases, et cetera. We need that kind of reform. But you'll have the final words for our discussion today. Dr. Murray.
Sure. Thank you, Howard, and Imam. It's been great to be with you again. I appreciate the time. You know, our nation is such a unique country, and our Constitution, and we look at our democracy, and we're like a living organism that shifts and changes. We are so blessed as a nation that we have the individual rights that we have. And that even in the most difficult situations that people see around the world with America, there are still many people that just dream about coming to this country to be able to have an opportunity to be who they want to be. And that's what this nation is all about, that it's about us being who we want to be. The challenge is that when you have such a diverse community, is that we must be united on principles in the public square, forsaking, really loving my brother or loving my sister, the sanctity of life, making sure we protect one another. Those kinds of things are and those are all found in all your major religions. So, there's that common bond that brings us all together. But in order for us to be able to build upon and move past the errors of the present and the past is that we need to give voice to and provide action to the issues. Yes. And so really, I challenge everyone that is watching, especially those in the United States, that you are blessed and have a God-given right, and we must go out and vote. We must go out and be active in our communities. And if you're in the capital area, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, please feel free to get in touch with the host here. And if you want more information about our coalition and the work that we're doing, and you want to be able to give, be a part of that and help add voice to these issues like what we're seeing right now with Judge Cordero and these UC case, it's setting a precedent that is very wrong, and that we need to really bring about change. So it's important, whether everyone that's listening, everyone that will be watching this, we must understand that we have to say you can't violate the Constitution as a government official, as a court official. You do not have the authority or the right to do that. And therefore, it's most important that we, as a citizen, can get up and give voice to that and advocate for that. So this forum gives us that opportunity to discuss it, to lay everything out and say, these are the issues. And now you've been made aware. Now we're educating you. And now we need to advocate and bring about the change and protect our First Amendment rights by stepping up and saying with this UC case that, hey, you're violating First Amendment rights for this faith community, this church organization, and you need to step out, and they need to reverse whatever judgments they've made that are against, because they have no right to make any judgment, period. So that's my final words. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you so much, so much. And thank you both, Dr. Murray, Imam Talib. We're so grateful that we have two champions like you defending the religious freedom and supporting interfaith work there in our nation's capital. God bless you both in your work. We're so grateful.
Thank you again.
I mean, thank you indeed.
And thank you, listeners, viewers, for tuning in today's program. If you enjoyed this discussion, please click the like button and the subscribe button on your internet connection there. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic and other topics on religious freedom. So please use the chat button to put in any points you would like us to discuss in the future. And also, if you have questions, our staff will get back to you through the internet there as well. Our next event in this series will be next Friday, July the 3rd. No, not July 3rd. That's already passed. Next Friday, this coming Friday, also featuring leaders from the United States. And I want you all to know that we cannot have another rally in Washington, D.C. because of the pandemic at the moment, but we're going to hold a virtual rally on July the 16th and invite you all to join that. Please mark it on your calendar. You'll be getting further notices about that. And if you're interested in knowing more about Right to Believe or would like to join our global efforts, please visit our website at righttobelieve.org. Thank you, everyone. God bless you all. Good day.